All right. Well, hello. Welcome to. Looks like there's one of you in there, based on what I'm seeing in the chat. A little, which I use to monitor how many people are there, because it says at the top. Welcome to my Wednesday stream breakdown, continuing the breakdown of the tracks from my album, Mechanics of Mysticism. You'll have to let me know how the audio sounds. I did some testing beforehand, but this is a work in progress. I'm constantly screwing with my setup, and if the audio sounds way out of balance, you should let me know. Today we'll be looking at two tracks, tracks 3 and 4 from the album. It's the Fugue States for Fun and Profits is one of them, and Embrace the Weird is the other. And I'm actually going to do them in reverse order. So track 3 is Fugue States for Fun and Profits, and track 4 is Embrace the Weird. But I'm going to do Embrace the Weird first, mostly because it's simpler. There's less to say about it, and so it'll take a little less time. And make sure we have time for the other one, which is a little more complex. And give us a chance to go a little deeper. Okay, so Embrace the Weird is the 4th track on the album, and it's actually, interestingly, or perhaps that's not interesting to you, I guess I don't really know, it's the first track that I started for the album, and this right here is the first, I don't know what you'd call it, the first thing that I recorded that made it onto the album. First thing I started to work with, at least on the album. I might have recorded something else first, but this is the first thing that I started to work on, was this little loop, riff, recording, whatever you want to call it, right here. As you can probably see from the name of the track and the name of the file here, is the Make Noise easel. So that is to say, it is the combination of the Strega, O-Coast, and O-Control as a controller, all put together, and they make this sound. Now, the that sort of combination. Actually, I'll just let that. That combination was kind of key to the creation of this album. I think that at least one of those instruments, either the Strega or the O-Coast, controller doesn't actually make sounds. You can argue whether that's an instrument or not. Is on every track of this album. There's some Strega, some O-Coast, or some combination of both on pretty much every track of this album. That was intentional. Kind of chose those as the core synthesizers, core synthesis voices for the album, and later I added the Hydrosynth for chord. I think at this point I'd already sort of decided that, but what that meant sort of became different as we went on. But yeah, so this loop right here, as you can see, this recording of audio, this is something that I made in the, I think I did this in the pre-production phase, but I might have done it like on day 1 of the recording phase, came up with this little loop, and so this was the basis for my first track. So I thought, oh, okay, that's pretty good. And that ended up turning into this. And so this track is probably, I honestly, just based on looking at my stats and whatnot, one of the less well-liked ones on the album. It gets a fair number. This is frequently where people start to skip, which I don't know. I don't really understand. I think it's a pretty good track. It's I don't know. Maybe it's not as, despite the name, maybe it's not as far out as some of the other ones. Although, if anything, that would maybe be. And that's sort of its album placement is sort of like, okay, we've had a couple pretty weird tracks, and then we'll get into something, or a few really weird tracks, and this sort of closes out as track 4, the first third of the album. And so it's almost a little refuge, a little breather, like before you get into even weirder stuff going in. That's how I thought in sequencing anyway. Doesn't really matter. I mean, the one person who's told me that they liked this track, that it was their favorite, was my real estate agent. Actually, I like to send things to. I always tell people I'm a musician when I, in IRL, in real life. I'll mention that just kind of casually. And anytime anyone asks, "Oh, have you released anything, or where can I hear your stuff?" I always send them something. You got to take advantage. You never know when you're going to find listeners, where you're going to find fans. So my realtor at the time, he's not my realtor anymore. When I mentioned that I was a musician, was like, "Hey, you should send me your music." And so I did. And I sent him this album, and this is the track. He came back and said he enjoyed this one. So probably that means it's as far as he got into the thing, and it was the one that was least objectionable. I don't know. He might have just picked one at random and said that he liked it too, but that's the only person who specifically mentioned that. Hey, Lucy, how's it going? Long time no see. Wow, it is wonderful to run into you here. I was just thinking about you the other day, and it's just great. I'm going to try not to let this completely derail any discussion of the thing and turn into the Lucy and Corey catch-up hour, but we'll see. Maybe in the back half we could do some of that. Anyway, getting back on... Oh, and thank you, by the way, for the compliment for the artwork. The artist that I work with is near and dear to my heart in many levels because I married her. That's my wife that did the artwork. She had been doing art along those lines for actually not that long. She's just gotten into... She's done visual art of various sorts throughout her life. Sorry for this little digression, but it is about the album. She had been a visual artist on some level for most of her life, but a lot of it was more on I guess people would consider craft and less art. She did scrapbooking, for example, and stuff like that. But she's always kind of dabbled a little bit. And then about, I want to say it was just post-lockdown, early 21, 22 maybe, she picked up this sort of online community of artists. It's maybe even a little bit of a grift. It's kind of a method of drawing, if you will, that she was comfortable with. She's never been super comfortable with, her own skills or talent. Imposter syndrome is nonsense. But she got in this thing, this kind of program, whatever group, and learned some skills and started doing these things. And I was like, oh, shit, this is really good. Was there any chance you would want to draw me an album cover? And I kind of described what I wanted. And basically I just told her that I wanted this sort of circular theme that kind of converged in the middle, which I think you can see in the art, and that I wanted it to be trippy as hell. Those were basically my two directions. And I had a piece of reference art that I showed her that is irrelevant. It was just something I had sort of come up with as a design, just to give some guidance. But anyway, so fun little digression there. Hope that wasn't too boring for people who don't care about the art. We can get back to the music now. Like I said, I started this. This is very much based on this one loop here. That's where this all started. I liked the loop. It was a file called Easel Talking. And I think here it just says easel, and that's where all this came from. Okay, so kind of vital statistics here. This track is in B minor. It's got a chord progression. It uses the 7, 5, 4, 1 chord, so that's it'd be what? A, is that an A major? Yeah. Or is it A minor chord? Anyway. Yep. Those are the chords. It also uses, so we got mini root 2 on bass, and Hydra's doing chords, and then there's also a chord sequence, I want to say, that comes from the ESQ. Yes, okay, so these chords here are Hydrascent. Solo these. That's Hydrascent. playing the main chord sequence. Okay. And now here's the ESQ. It's playing the same chords as I recall, although I did fuck them up at one point, but I think I got them fixed. Playing the same chords, but instead of playing a more rhythmic thing, it's just sort of the background, and it's running through tape and a symphonic effect, which is it's a famous Yamaha chorus effect. You may or may not be familiar with it. It's on the SPX 90. Right on. Thanks, Lucy. I will tell her that, and you and I should definitely catch up when we have some time. I've been intending to actually do some hangout streams at some point where I just kind of hang out and shoot the shit with people. Maybe that'd be a good chance for us to catch up. Anyway, so these chords are... it's a Ensoniq ESQ, which is a vintage synth from the mid-'80s. That is... it's a hybrid digital... wavetable. It says wavetable. They're just really single cycle samples through a analog filter is what it is. So it's digital hybrid analog, really cool synth. SQ80 is its successor, and then later evolved into the VFX SD1 line, which are all digital versions, but a very similar architecture. But if you can get your hands on an ESQ or an SQ80, or there's a really good emulation of it in the Arturia V collection. If you're not into vintage synths. Oh, no Ableton sound? What? That's no good. That's no good. What's going on? Oh, I have muted it because I'm a fucking genius. Sorry, I was screwing around before the thing. Well, thanks. I'm glad that someone was there to tell me I didn't completely screw up the entire thing here. Okay, so that's what the ESQ sounds like. Here's the Hydrasynth chords. We didn't even miss that much. And we'll do this easel thing here. I mentioned that already, since that was sort of the key. Well, I feel like a big dummy now. So yeah, so this is what started it all. I liked this loop. I made this loop with the easel. I liked it. And I decided, okay, yep, let's take that and cut it up, put it in the thing. Yeah, chords. So yeah, like I said, these chords, Ensoniq ESQ, then going through a Yamaha RX or Rex 50, REX50, which is an SPX 90 and a different casing with an added distortion effect. That's a little tip for you if you're looking for some vintage effects but cannot afford. Sorry about that. Again, sorry, y'all. I was, like I said, I was doing some testing right before I started, and I had something muted. I didn't realize it. I feel like a complete dumbass. Apologies. The nature of going live, I guess. Yeah, okay, so this track came together really quick. I think I was like, the heart of it was done basically within 2 days of me starting. And then I definitely added a bunch of stuff to it over time, lots of layers and production and stuff. But the actual song did not change much. Came together really fast. If the whole album had come together this quickly, it would have been done in my original time frame, which was supposed to be like 5 months. It was supposed to be done by the end of the year, well before the end of the year that this came out. So this should have come out technically in 2023 instead of 2025. But life didn't do that. And I'll get into this a little more on the next track, but. And this bass line is actually kind of interesting too. Let me play this real quick. So this is the Mini Brute 2. And it's a fun little trick. If you have a synthesizer that has a notch filter, so I think you can hear there's quite a fair bit of movement in this bass sound. And you hear that, or filters all across the top there. But at the same time, you'll notice that the fundamental of the bass is It's not affected at all, and the volume of the bass is very barely affected at all. And this is a notch filter bass, is what it is. So rather than use it, typically with a bass sound, you get low pass filter. You just filter out all the high end, and this gives you kind of a very bright bass sound with a lot of movement. But it doesn't affect the volume at all. It doesn't affect the higher frequencies at all. So it's a very distinctive bass sound. It's not something you want to use all the time, but if you ever are looking for a different approach for bass, use a notch filter if you've got one. You can also use them in series, like if you want a low pass filter, doing what low pass filters do for your kind of core sound. But then maybe during a bridge or something like that, you want to fuck it up. You can open up the low pass filter all the way and then use the notch filter. And you can also put the notch filter, you maybe raise the low pass filter a little higher than you normally would, and then use the notch filter to kind of cut out some additional harmonics and provide the movement. Just a fun trick, So, or technique. It's not really a trick. It's just a technique. So there's nothing tricky about it. It's just using a lesser used filter in a way to provide a little color. Okay, so the drums on this are pretty simple too. Got a pretty basic drum machine beat here. Come on, you bastard. Just play from there. There we go. That's drum boot impact. And then this part here is some additional percussion I did, and it has been run through a cassette. So it's just boom, cassette color. And I'm pretty sure these sounds were this is from the MPC and then run through a cassette and resampled. And then here's the hi-hats, also through a cassette, and a bunch of effects too, as I recall. Like the effects aren't on here now because I didn't have to leave them on, but yeah, here they are. This is what is going through there. So well, let's see, maybe not. Maybe I had it sent through some other stuff too. But anyway, I swear there's like a flanger and stuff going on there. But obviously it's not on now, so it's obviously on the recording. Yeah. And I tried recording the hi-hats and this percussion, because this all came out of the, oh, you know what, it's probably out of the MPC. I'm pretty sure this also came out of the MPC. No, it came out of this drum rack, actually. I must have just taken the effects off at some point, I guess. Oh, wait, I know what I did. They're on the actual channels. Yeah, that's what's going on. I got them put on the channels. I forget that you can do that with Drum Sampler. Well, I don't forget. It just slipped my mind here. So we got like a flanger effect going on that. Recorded all that cassette to give it a little more color and cohesion. Like I said. And then there's also a take of these two things together, but it was much more flexible to put them in individually to give me a little more control over like what parts were getting overdriven on the tape and whatnot. But yeah, so this one uses a little tape for color. It's got that bass effect. Yeah. And then I also layered up the chords here, so you can see here we got the chords playing the sort of rhythmic part, and then this is playing more sustained elements. See, they're still switching there, switch there, but they're not. They're playing a non, and this is playing the rhythmic part. So this plays in the opener. This kind of comes in to layer it. Then they all overlap here for what, 4 bars? Yep. And then this takes over as the main rhythmic voice. And then at the time that this bows out, we also have this providing a little undergird. And so this is a technique that I used a lot on this album where like I like repetitive parts where things sort of, hey, how's it going, Swarm? or sort of just plays the same riff or chord sequence or whatever for a while. I'm a big fan of repetition in music in general, but I also don't like to get bored. I also have pretty severe ADHD, and so and I don't want listeners to get bored, really, more to the point. It's not just about my boredom. And so on this album, I still wanted to use these repetitive elements, but I didn't want to get bored. I didn't want them to feel so static. So I would just constantly change what was actually playing a part and layered up things, layered and layered and layered. And so this is a really good example where it starts with one voice. After like the first repetition, so this is just like a little 4-chord sequence. Maybe it doesn't even go. It looks like it just actually goes 3 bars, and then the support comes in and starts layering it up, and then that goes like 8 more bars or whatever. There's a little break in the support here, and then it starts up again on the 17th bar. The chord sequence starts again. We've added another layer that goes for 4 bars. Drop a layer out, add a different layer. That one plays for a while, and then we end on just the one layer on its own gets to be kind of soloed for a while at the end. And so it's constantly varying. As it goes through, you don't even really necessarily notice it. Like if I solo this whole group, and we'll just start like 2 bars in. I mean, you will notice it when it's soloed like this, but when it's all together, I don't know that it's like super obvious. Or that it's obvious that these things are like going together or whatever. Okay, so then it does that for a while. You see that layer kind of drops out, and then we have another layer comes in. And then the sandwich shifts. We lose the top layer, which is our original layer, but we gain another layer underneath. It's kind of like a choiry pad. That goes on for a while. And then the chords for the rest of the song are just maintained by this sort of washy, static chord progression. Same with this easel thing here. So this is again the main track that this whole thing started with. Arguably it's the lead. I mean, it's not really the lead, but it is sort of this thing that started. And that's what I did there is I just layered that with, oops, that's not what we want to do. Layered that with some different sounds from the Mini Brute 2. It's this MB2 weirdness. And then also, this is a Op6 patch here. And so those, you can kind of see how those are all like fit the vibe of these. They're all kind of similar, but different. And so as this sequence plays, you get different layers at different times. Sometimes all 3 layers, sometimes just 2 of them. Sometimes they're doing different things. Okay. The leads here, this is a Microfreak patch. It's layered up with so this just says lead. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I made a note of it in here either. Yeah, I don't know what that... Yeah, this is again just a layered thing here, and I don't remember for sure what these synthesizers were, so I know that's making this part less interesting, but Yeah, that OpSec patch is actually, I believe it is a preset. Here, let's look at it. I want to say that maybe this track, this SMP lead, you'd think that I would know what my own abbreviations mean, but again, this stuff's 2 years old. If my MPC was not packed away, I would have pulled it out and looked at the files. It's probably in there what this is. It might even be one of the built-in soft synths on the MPC, or it's something that I just recorded into it and rendered out. So, right, the Op6 patch is, yeah, it is one of the presets that's called Shimmer and Folder. Oh, I think it's muted right now, isn't it? Of course it is. So, as I recall, you have an Op6, so you have this patch. It's patch 80. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. Okay. And so that's pretty much it. So this came together pretty quick. Like I said, 2 or 3 days. The majority of this came together, and then the production stuff came together over the same 2-year period as everything else did. I would work on it a little here and a little there. But this one honestly felt pretty close to done in that initial period. It's the most authentic to this original process that I was trying to do. And then I think maybe that's why it's not as interesting to some people, some other stuff on the album, because it just uses this sort of it sounds a little more, I guess, like the music from Psychedelic Ghost Stories, the previous one, and in part because it uses a very similar technique that I used for all that, which is to say I would just open up a file in the MPC, start with something like, sometimes I would start with just an idea like a key and whatever. In this case, I did start with that loop. That's why this is a weird, you'll notice this is a 76.7 BPM. And most of my BPMs are all whole number. I don't really get into this like, oh, I'm going to futz around with tenths of a fucking BPM. I usually make jumps of 3 to 5 BPM if I want to change the BPM, because you actually want to hear what the different BPM is. But this BPM was derived from the original, the initial easel loop. So I made the easel loop. I brought it into the MPC. It detected the BPM at 76.7, and that's what this was set at. So it's as simple as that. That's why it's that. Sorry, I looked at the chat and completely knocked every thought that I was having out of my head. But yeah, so that's why it's that weird tempo. Anyway, and yeah, that's pretty much it. We can touch real quick on this one. Was, as I recall, mix and master was fine. I don't remember any real issues with it. The mastering chain, this is my standard mastering chain. We can go into it a little more on the other one. It doesn't look like I used any automation on this. This was a very simple master to do. Okay, so let's look at, we are halfway through, so if we're going to get through 2, and the other one is actually a little more complex, let's go ahead and jump to it now. Nope, don't save changes. So the other track here is track 3, Fugue States for Fun and Profits. A little note about Embrace the Weird, the name of that. That is tied to, first of all, I just thought it was a cool name. I think it just came off my list of names. I have a big list of names. Oh yeah, thanks, Swarm. It does sort of call back. It kind of connects the albums in a way. Another interesting connection is, so there's one track on this album that was made in essentially the same way that most of the tracks on Psychedelic Ghost Stories were made. Kind of a throwback. That's Embrace the Weird that we just did. And this one to some degree as well, although this one's like a weird hybrid. And then the other thing that's interesting is there's one track on Psychedelic Ghost Stories, the title track, Psychedelic Ghost Stories, that was made in the way that all the other 10 tracks on this, all but these 2, were made, which is to say I did a jam, and then I cut up the jam and rearranged the bits of it to, or an improv. It's not a jam. It's just me. You can't jam with yourself, right? Solo jam is just an improv improvisational electronic performance, and then I cut up the pieces. And that's how 10 of the tracks on this were made, and one of the tracks on Psychedelic Ghost Stories, and 2 of the tracks on this were made that way, made the way that Psychedelic Ghost Stories was, which is just to say, take something, cut it up, and start building. Usually, I chords or drums, plus a loop, and then just kind of go from there. But okay, so this track gave me fits. I started this, like I said, 4 days, maybe 5 days into the recording process for this album, and was like 3 or 4 weeks later, barely had a notion of what I was doing with this. Now, there was a version of this track that existed at that point, but it did not sound anything like what you hear today. This one in particular continued to mutate and change throughout the process, all the way up basically almost until the end. Because arguably the most important part of this one is this part here, which is a Somatera part. It's sort of the lead to this whole thing. There's also this easel part that it plays with and around. The easel part is sort of the bed for this, if you will. And then this easel part is clearly the lead. And yeah, this easel part was one of the last new parts that I did in recording. So I started this 3 days into May 2023, and I recorded the most important part of it, this part here, in August of 2024. So a year and a half afterwards. It was one of the last parts of my writing process. It was putting this particular lead line to the track. And yeah, so this is, like I said, it's the Somatera, which, if you're not familiar with it, is an unusual sort of wooden disc of a synthesizer studded with these sort of brass buttons, they're not buttons or knobs, they're protuberances. They're just little brass humps that you control via capacitive touch. It's got 12, 16 of those, and then it's also got some little touch LED things and some actual knobs and some more traditional controls. But very unusual synthesizer, very cool, and it was used a lot on this, and this is on this album in general, and this track in particular is. At the point that I added this, I was sort of under the impression this track was done, but it really, really felt like it was missing something. There just wasn't enough there. And if you were to play the track, let's play without this part, you can see that it's just it's not bad. There's definitely something there. But again, at this point in the process, so this is what I was listening to roughly. There were definitely some changes made to it after that, some production things added and whatnot. But essentially, this is what I was listening to in August of last year, and thinking that this track was done, but not very good. So that was my feeling at that point. It was okay, well, this is done. I don't know what else I would add to it, but it's sure not very interesting. There's not really much to it. So I was, at that point, sort of adding a little bit of Somatera to a couple other tracks, and I thought, well, maybe what this needs is some kind of lead. That's what I felt like it was missing, was a lead. So I busted out the Somatera and started basically playing this on a loop. I just turned on the loop braces and played it on a loop and sort of just improv'd along with the Terra. And I came up with this sort of meandering melody that you hear here, and recorded it over, looks like, I probably did 10 or 12 takes, and I kind of just improv'd each time. I definitely was not playing a specific thing, although I very quickly, probably by the second or third pass, had developed a sort of a number of riffs that I would and sequences that I would incorporate, and you can kind of hear those repeat throughout the thing. And yeah, and then I recorded like 10 or 12 takes. Let's see, actually, we can see the take lanes. I don't know. Turn off automation lanes, and then show take lanes. There we go. There they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 takes is what I did. And as you can see, every one of them had a little piece. Oh, that's not true. The fourth take. Or 9 takes I did. And the fourth take, it contributed nothing. Some of them contributed just a tiny, like one little, oh, I nailed that part there, and then I nailed the next part and the next one, and I got this part. But big chunks of several of them. Yeah, and I comped together this track here. And became a big fan of comping, actually, in this process. And then another sort of late addition to this was this part that I call the fugue. So the name for this one actually came towards the end as well, even though the track came fairly early. It had a couple different working titles. And then I came up with this idea for, like 6 months in or something. The title, Fugue States for Fun and Profits, occurred to me. And that's kind of a silly play on words and also commentary on a lot of what mystics do. From an outside perspective, like I believe if you're watching someone have a mystical experience, what you would see is essentially them going into like a fugue state. Their eyes sort of focused on something distant that you can't see. They're not responding to stimuli in the room. They're off in their own little world. It's a fugue state, right? And prophets, mystics, visionaries, prophets, embrace these fugue states, but also so do kids that like getting high. I can't, there's not much difference from a teenager on a head full of LSD in a bedroom with the lights off and a black light on, and there is some mystic in a cave staring at the wall. They're both fugue states, essentially. They're the same fugue state, essentially, and that's so for fun and profits. And then, of course, that's X for fun and profit is sort of, it's an older formulation, but when I was growing up, in this, like, I don't even want to say when, I'm Gen X, so it's in the 70s and 80s, X for fun and profit was like a thing that you would hear, raise chinchillas for fun and profit, don't mention that you have to slaughter them and sell the fur, or grow vegetables for fun and profit in your bedroom, that kind of shit. And so it's just a phrase that stuck in my head, and that's where the name for this one came from. It's a very, so about the Soma Terra, it is an incredible instrument. It has definitely changed the way that I approach music. You can't sequence it, for one thing, and over the years, I've become more of a player and less of a programmer, sequencer, but I'm still definitely, sequencing is still my native language for the most part. So it is, but it definitely has affected how I approach using it because I can't sequence it. So everything I do, I have to play on it. So sometimes that means I played relatively simple things, and then it's where I came up with this idea to get into the comping. As I knew that this comping feature existed. I had never really used it before. I hadn't had a lot of reason to use it before, but and I think I used that once or twice else on this as well. But I decided to try that either here or I'm not sure I tried it on this track first. This might have been the second or third time I tried it. But yeah, and it worked out beautifully. So yeah, it definitely did affect the way that the music and changed the music. And these several tracks on this really lean on the Terra for their lead. It's just such an expressive instrument, and I can really sort of lose myself in it a little bit and kind of go off on some pretty wild, flights of fancy, if you will. So yeah, it's been very influential on my music. Yeah, I think before that I was going over these fugue states. These are Morphogene reels that I recorded. I think they're voices that are run through, like they're granularized. It's probably some samples of someone, like just something I recorded like off YouTube or whatever. I just stuck a tape recorder, quite possibly this tape recorder, into in front of the speakers and recorded some, someone saying something funny or silly or not. I don't know. Just I like the tone of the voice. Maybe I was even bored and I was just amusing myself. And then took those, put them into Morphogene, ran them through, did the Morphogene thing, which is to say, kind of chop them up, granularize them, play little sequences in and out of order. And then definitely here also, there's probably filtering, most likely the Q-Pass, Mimeophone, and Desmodius Verso, which is kind of a reverb / tail generator. Yeah, and then this is the result. Somatera also did this transitional bit here. It's from the opening. Somatera, there's some noise, and then a Microbrute 2 element there. Yeah, and then these are all just like the MIDI bits for different things. Chords here. So this is B. Pretty certain that's Micro Freak, and then it's reinforced here with K4. More chords. This, since it says int chords, yeah, this is Hydrasynth. I can see that it's on the name here. Yeah. Oh, no, it's not. It's hype. Okay, so it is internal chords. So, sorry. This is why you always think that your notes are better than they are until you actually look at them. So this actually is one of the internal synths on the... That's why it says int chords, internal to the MPC. So this is the hype synthesizer on the MPC. And it's a pretty nice sounding synth. I don't ever program it because I don't love the interface. It feels a little fiddly. But I'm not above using presets here and there, and that's what this is. It's a preset from the hype synth that's just playing the chord sequence. And then this layer is Hydra, and then K4. Oh, okay, this is interesting. So the chords here on the outro, intro and outro, I layered up, as you can see, just a ton of synths. So there's wave station layer on this, and each of these is playing one note of the chord. So... oops. And doing something interesting with it. Okay, right. And I use, so yeah, Pigment. I think I was trying to use every synth, soft synth plugin that I had. Is that what I was trying to do? Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to do. Oh yeah, and I used one of the, used Operator here, Drift here, Op6 Native. Yeah, so I used Drift and Operator plus like every plugin I think that I had at the time, which is Op6, Pigments, Dream Synth, and the Wave Station plugin. And together, these all sound like... Yeah, and so that's just for the intro and outro. I did something similar here. So... people will tell you that you're not supposed to layer bass, and that's probably true depending on what you're trying to do. Like if your stuff's aimed at the dance floor, like you probably don't want to be layering bass, like any phase cancellation is going to fuck you up. But my music's made for headphones. It's okay if the bass loses some of its guts here and there, as long as it sounds cool throughout. And so I'm not afraid to layer bass. And so here what you have is some different micro-Fugue basses being layered. This S&P bass is probably against something internal. That indicates to me that that's S&P. That probably was, again, an abbreviation that made sense to me at the time, that was supposed to tell me that it was something inside the MPC. The rest of these layers are just different layers of micro-Fugue. So it's got the noise engineering bass. I have one called it Swirls, which isn't a bass sound, but I'm playing in the bass register. Same with the sci-fi staple sound. And this one here. Oops. And you can definitely get, there's some phase cancellation happening there, but I don't think it negatively affects the music. That's what I think. And then here we have like some different percussion stuff here. I think this is maybe me just saying shh. And then it's like processed. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what this is me going shh. And then I've cut off all but the highest high end, stuck through a flanger and a delay. And so this is like a little sample of me going shh, 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 shh. And then using a random to select in Ableton. So I've just like hit one key and then it randomly selects which slice. Yeah, and then it's filtered and blah, blah, blah to give it this sort of hi-hat sound. What do we got going on here? Oh yeah, right. And here we got some drum sounds, stuff that I sampled. And it's going through some delay to give some like weird counter rhythmic, just to add some complexity. And also, I guess, through some a beat repeat to give it some, really get weird. So it looks like this is just an eighth note delay, so it's not adding much complexity. The brain, this is where I guess the weirdness is coming through. Yeah, these beat repeat effects are pretty fun and wild, and they were definitely a thing I appreciated having access to in Ableton, which I did not have access to. This drum part is, again, it's just a bunch of samples that I've made in modular and whatnot. I'd have to look and see exactly what samples these are, but if you go to my Gumroad, and I can pass that info along to anyone, I think most of these drum sounds are in my sample kit. There's like it's called the Ether Diver Sample Lab 1, and it's like, it's not huge, it's like 50 or 60 samples, including like 25 drum sounds, 25 drum sounds, somewhere in there. And yeah, I think a lot of those come from there. I'm always happy to share the stuff that I create. So the drums on this one are not drum machine versus most of the album is. But yeah, that is that one. This gave me absolute fits. I just could not make any progress on it. But I just stuck with it. I thought about abandoning it multiple times. But I really felt like there was something there. And so I stuck with it. Oh, by the way, this is an F sharp major, 73 BPM. Yeah, there was an easel sequence, a drone patch that went in there, layers. I don't even think that made it to the end. This, again, was like cut down and rebuilt and reformulated multiple times. Yeah, it's got a 5-4-1 chord progression. I don't think that's what it started with. I think that's just what it ended with. And so those are all the major chords in F sharp major. So that'd be like oh God, C sharp major, B major, and then F sharp major. Those are the chords. Yeah. But yeah, I think that this one, if anything, it's just, if you feel like there's something there, you got to trust your gut and continue to work at it, even if it is making you kind of crazy. This one definitely came, like I said, in spurts. And maybe this is a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the utility of naming your tracks while they are still in progress. So I've tried it both ways. Like a lot of my first couple albums were mostly I would finish a track and then come up with a name for it. Sometimes the name based on the vibe of the track, and sometimes I would just keep a list of names and I would go down and be like, sure, that'll fit. That seems to fit this. Always with intention. It wasn't like random, but it was a little bit of a after the fact matching something together with something that just all came together at the end, so to speak. So it's, again, not that there's not intentionality there. It's not as influential as the process as it could have been because it came after the fact. For all of these tracks, I think, actually, it's just a question of when. The title came in before the track was done. And for me, the titles, and again, in having an overarching narrative for the entire album, making it sort of a concept album, really helps me out because a title sort of presents a question that the music then answers. The question is, what would this sound like? What would a track with this title sound like, right? That's the title. What does this title suggest to you? And then the answer is what it actually sounds like. And so this track, getting its name, it had a bunch of different working titles. I think I mentioned that. But once it actually had its name, that's when I think it really started to come together, and that's what got it through to the end. If I had not named this one until the end, it never would have been done. I never would have finished it. It would have just languished in some sort of middle state indefinitely. But once I had the title, once I knew it was called Fugue States for Fun and Profits, that led me to put it together in the quote unquote right way. Because now I had a question: what does a track called Fugue States for Fun and Profits sound like? And what it sounds like is this. This is what it sounds like. And so to give you a more concrete example, instead of just like, it's vibes, man, I just felt, I gave it a name and then I felt the vibe. For example, this track is called Fugue because I was like, okay, Fugue States for Fun and Profits. So I had this like idea of having it, the structure of it be that you would kind of come in and out of these fugue states because, again, when you're tripping balls or having a mystical experience, it's usually not fully constant. There's usually periods of relative lucidity where you're like, oh, wow, that was weird. I just saw God for 20 minutes and we had a conversation about lamps. And then, the people you're with are like, oh, that's fucking wild. Like, is it still going? And you're like, it is. It's a little milder now. Oh, never mind. It's coming back. And then you kind of fall back, especially depending on the drugs. Mushrooms are very much this way. Most of the mescaline derivatives, mescaline style drugs, so including DOM, DOB, DOI, those all kind of come in waves. And so I wanted that sort of like, oh, here it comes, wave crests. It gets real fucking weird. And then it breaks a little bit and sort of comes back to not normal, but something that resembles normal, and then crests again on another wave, which I will say that was a guideline going into making the thing. I'm not sure it's fully expressed in the in track, but that's okay. But it did guide me in putting all this together. And then one of the things I realized is that I needed to have these fugue tracks. Turn the automation back on here, and you can see, like I'm saying, like it starts off and then it kind of fades out, and then it ramps back in, it reaches a peak and then goes back out and is almost gone, and then it's gone for a little while, and then it comes back, reaches a peak for a while, and then we have an outro. And when I was, once I had the name Fugue States for Fun and Profits, I was just like, oh, well, I need to have my fugue, the sort of like the sort of bubbly, weird, spacey, psychedelic element that sort of fades in and out, and that's the sort of thing. And then so I made this, and this is definitely adds to the track. It's a big part of the atmosphere of the track. It's not a huge compositional element, like it's not carrying melodic, harmonic, rhythmic information, but it's providing a huge amount of texture and a huge amount of vibe. And I wouldn't have known to put that in there until I knew what this was, until I knew it was Fugue States for Fun and Profits. Similarly, like this Terra thing that came later, I think that's on some level, that's just what I knew. Like I knew I needed to sort of have a musical element in addition to the textural element. I needed to have a musical element that sort of expressed the sort of the energy, the almost the message, if you will, of what that was about. And that's what this Terror track ended up being. It's there's an element of, I don't know, maybe a wistfulness to it, but also this sort of slightly alien, slightly unusual beauty. It's definitely the Terror does this really cool panning effect. It's got a really nice stereo element built in that's completely out of your control, or if you can control it, I've not figured out how. You can control it by using a mono output and just doing your own panning or auto panning. But if you put a stereo output out of it, you get this panning effect you're hearing is all it. That's not. It's all out of my control, but it's so nice, and it just shifts around the stereo space, and it's very cool. And yeah, so the name again sort of inspired this. The name gave the thing shape, is really what I'm trying to say. If this track was called something else, it would not sound like it sounds. It's as simple as that. And so there's something to say about for naming your tracks while they're in progress, and then working towards that name. Some of the tracks that's even more true on. Like when we get towards again, Temple of Vintage and Beckons, there's definitely a story behind that and how that all came to be. But we are rapidly hitting that 1 hour and 30 minute, or rather 1 hour mark. It's 1:30. So I've been going about an hour. I've been trying to keep these to an hour. So let's answer any questions anyone has and wrap up. Again, the mastering on this one has a little more, like I boosted the high end, did a little more with the EQ than I do on most of these, but it's not much. I don't think there's any automation. Nope, no automation. So if you're, oh my goodness, sorry about that. I guess you guys can't see that, but if you're worried about like getting to like doing your own mastering and you're like, oh, it's got to be super complex, and you see all these automation lanes that people do for their mastering, you can do all that. I'm not saying you shouldn't or whatever, but you don't have to. I think this mastering of this sounds pretty good, and it's mostly static. There is some automation on a couple of tracks, but it's really minor. It's like a little EQ cut or boost that comes in at one point and then disappears at a later point. It's definitely not any sort of like crazy, I've seen some people's, mastering chains and mastering automation, and God bless them. This is not a criticism. Certainly, they're working on a level that I'm not, or they're bringing all sorts of things in and out, and things are clicking on and off, and more compression, less compression on this part. I didn't really feel I need to do most of that in the album, and so I didn't. But it can be done. But really the point is you don't have to do that. If you spend a little more time on mixing and composition. I didn't feel like I had much to fix in the master. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. By the time I got to mastering, I was good. I spent a lot of time in the mixing, in the sense that it took me 6 months, or like 9 months actually. Like I finished writing and recording this basically in August of 24, and then it didn't come out until May of 25. But actually I think most of that time was, I wasn't actively mixing most of that time. I was avoiding mixing, and then I was listening and sort of like prepping myself to do it. But really, I was mostly kind of taking a break from stuff and letting it sit in the background while I just didn't really pay much attention to it. And then when I actually took time to mix it, it took a couple of, I don't know, I probably spent 3 or 4 weeks on the actual mixing. This one, I don't think it had much issues. By the time I got it to mastering, it definitely didn't have many issues. And so, yeah, that's why the mastering's all pretty simple. Wasn't trying to fix things, just trying to get some more loudness. And I think we got that. Here we go. Some people, yeah, for sure. Swarm mentioned that some people play the mixer and compressor, and which is an art in itself. It absolutely is, and maybe someday I'll get there. I am still stumbling along, learning things with each release, with each effort, and only really in the last. I say this with every album though, so I'm sure it'll change again. It's like, I really feel like it only all came together during this album, but I felt that way in the last album, and I felt that way in the album before. I mean, each time I learn a bunch more and take it a little further and do a little better. And so maybe 3 album releases from now, I'll be laughing about how little automation I did and how I didn't touch my compressors except, at the very beginning to set them and forget them. And we'll all have a good laugh at how silly and how much I was leaving on the table there. But frankly, I felt like I was able to get enough loudness out of this simple and static setup that I was happy with it. I mentioned this before in the other ones. I don't use a lot of fancy metering. I don't even have a LUFS meter. Like, I barely know what that means. I'm not shooting for any. I don't use reference tracks. I just use my ears. I just tweak things until I think they sound what I want them to sound like. I do, however, have very strong opinions on what things are supposed to sound like. So I feel like I don't need some of those other things because of that. I can just use my ears and be like, yep, that sounds good. And I have a handful of speakers that I use for reference, none of which are very good. Like, my monitors are decent. My day-to-day monitors that I use they're actually crap. They're barely more than computer speakers. They're the Aris 3.5 models that you see. They're like $100. Again, just barely more than computer speakers. And then I also have, they're currently packed up in my current configuration, although I did use them for mixing this album, a pair of Kali 6.5s. And but I actually do most of my mixing in production on headphones, because I live in a small house with a lot of other people. I have my family. It's not like roommates, it's just my family. But they don't always want to hear me rehearsing, practicing, polishing, producing. So I do most of my work on headphones. I check things on the mixing and mastering of this. I did 85% of it on headphones, and then I would flip the mixes onto, I didn't even bother to use these Aris 3.5s. I would flip the mixes onto the Kalis, listen to them, make notes about what adjustments would need to be made, or even make actual adjustments while they were playing through there. Mostly I would make notes and then go back onto the headphones, make the adjustments, and then come back again for another listen. And that was it. And it was again, mostly just spot checking. And then once I had what I thought were good mixes, I put a very light fake master on them, just basically a limiter at the end to get it a little louder, and took those mixes and with the fake masters into my car and listened to them on like my car speakers and some different headphones that I have. And once I was happy with those, I just did the final master and then checked those again on the same sets of speakers and was ready to go. So that was it. That's my mastering process. That's the songs, and I think that's it. I'm going to play this song out. It doesn't look like anyone has any questions, so I'm just going to play the song to play us out. I know it's 2 songs, and I'm only going to play one of them. You can go listen to Embrace the Weird on the website if you want to, but I'm just going to hit play on this, play us out, and if you do have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'll just answer them in the comments. All right, take care. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. Bye.